Welcome back to SubHub, the podcast where we explore how to build, grow, and monetize great app businesses. Today, I'm joined by Evelin Herrera, a mobile app growth strategist and M&A advisor who helps founders scale smart and sell confidently. From tech stack decisions to profit mark benchmarks and what you really need on your P&L, we discuss all the valuation metrics that buyers actually care about. If you're building with the long game in mind, this one's a must listen. Here's my discussion with Evelin. Well, to start us off, I'd love to invite first Evelin to the show. How you doing?
Very good. Very excited to be here. Thank you, Ben.
So today what we're talking about is kind of a follow-up to an episode we recently released about app M&A, so like mergers and acquisitions, selling your application. I thought that Evelin would be a great guest to have on as a follow-up to that because we're going to talk about kind of the tips and tricks that you'll need to know in order to prepare your app for an exit. So maybe you're thinking about selling your app today or in the very near future, or maybe you're just kind of thinking about doing it in more of a long-term sense where you don't have any plans right now, but you'd like to set yourself up in a way where you're ready to sell if that opportunity were to arise. So today's goal is really to kind of dig into that. But before we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, Evelin, about kind of how you got started, how you got into this M&A business, and what led you to where you are today.
Yes, I've been in the app industry for 6 years, did everything from marketing, business development, and partnerships. And what I was thinking at some point is I'm never going to be the best at user acquisition. I'm not going to be the best at business development. I'm not going to be the best at app development. So I wanted to do something that I'm really the best at it, the number one in the market. And I was always really good in relationships in the industry. So meeting new people, making intros, relevant intros, keeping up with the relationships that I already made. So M&A was something that I started exploring in an organic way. I just get asked for help from both sides, buyers and sellers. Sure. So it happened organically. I started posting about it and the business grew just from inbound. Yeah. Then I left my 9-to-5 and decided to go all in selling apps. And so far it's going really good.
Well, let's use your considerable expertise to kind of talk a little bit about how you might prepare your application and your business to be ready for sale, even if you're going to not sell it today, maybe, at some point in the future. So what can people do to kind of really prepare themselves and build a strong foundation? I think the first thing maybe to consider would be as you're building the application and as you're building your tech stack and your, the business itself, there's things to consider there. What are some tips that you've seen or things that you've seen from buyers and sellers that people are looking for? I think getting that kind of insight from what each side wants, to see is going to be really helpful for founders and our app builders. So as far as like platforms in general, I feel like the advice has always been like build it for iOS first and then do, the other platforms should the market need arise. That is something that I've heard, but maybe that's not the case anymore. What have you found as far as like which platforms people are looking for?
So I think iOS always looks cooler. Like the design is nicer. The App Store is nicer than the Play Store. So it's, first of all, like cooler. Secondly, there's an obvious trend on X where everyone is talking about building for iOS and distributing through TikTok and influencer marketing. So I think there's a buzz around it. But the reality is that the market is bigger and there are buyers for everything. And right now, iOS and AI apps is extremely crowded versus Android, that there's a market of buyers looking for apps. There are no apps or it's very limited. And then I think with web is also now with the change on Apple, web to app is super profitable. If you unlock it before this change of Apple, it's even better because now you're going to make the most out of it. And if you didn't unlock it, now is the perfect timing. So I think diversifying is important. Because from the buyer standpoint, if they are buying just an iOS app, it's very risky for them because Apple can make any change in the future and that's going to affect your entire business because your business is this app. So if you can add Android and if you can also add any sort of interaction with the web, that can also help. Some of the companies I have been talking with, they also have Chrome extensions or a big community or anything that you can add outside of just the iOS app is going to help on the valuation. Because if you think about it, the buyer is looking to make an investment that is going to go 2 years from now or 5 years from now. But if you want to convince them to invest 5 years from now, then there must be some sort of diversification in terms of the risk that they are taking that is not that attached to Apple and the changes that they can make. So the business can be mainly driven by iOS in terms of revenue, but you also want to make a strong case by having other channels.
Yeah, it's like the iOS is kind of the thing that convinces someone to become interested in your product, right? Because that's the hot place to be. But you
Exactly.
want that diversification so that they can know, well, you're not just, all your eggs aren't in one basket, right? There are other ways that the business can be successful outside of that. We're recording this episode in early May when Apple was just handed down a very consequential decision by the US courts to require the ability to let developers and app makers to link out to other places to pay for applications. So you're hearing this in early June, but we just heard about this the other day that's different. And certainly I think that's going to change the calculus quite a bit, whether you want to sell your app or not, right? Like how you're going to monetize it. To go back to web to app really quick, for people who may not know what that means, can you give like a really just quick overview of like what that looks like or how that would work?
Yeah, so it can benefit companies or app developers from two sides. One is the acquisition and the other one is the conversion once you already got the user interested in your app. So in terms of acquisition, you can also play with new traffic sources or user acquisition channels. So for instance, you can start exploring Google search. That is an easier channel in terms of unlocking it like learning phase attribution and also finding the right keywords. And sometimes it's cheaper than Apple ads, no longer Apple search ads. So in terms of traffic or user acquisition, you got a new source. And in terms of conversion, it's also most of my clients, they have really strong conversion metrics from install to subscriber with web to app. So if you can also unlock that funnel and make the conversion rates higher than the average, that's going to increase the value of your asset at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think really building your tech stack such that you have maybe a couple different ways to acquire users or to find users and a couple different ways to provide a conversion flow for those users who are interested. It just gives you a stronger base, right? And it makes it so that hopefully your app will be more successful for you while you own it. And also it will make it more attractive for a buyer, right? Because they'll see that you have this kind of sophisticated way that you go about acquiring and converting users rather than just like, well, it's in the App Store, I have Apple search ads, and that's kind of the end of my story, right? Like it's one or nothing, right? It's as opposed to a more multifaceted approach.
Yeah. And one more comment with Android is that it seems super boring and that the users don't often pay for the app. And that's right. If you have like Android apps, the main monetization is not going to be through subscriptions or in-app purchases, but it's going to be mainly through in-app ads. But many of people that are like on X and just like new developers, they haven't heard of this, but it works just like Google AdSense, where you can have placements inside of your app and sell those placements. So you make money that way. And it's how Android monetizes mainly. And I also have some friends in the industry that they monetize Android with preload. So how this works is you make partnerships with telcos like T-Mobile, Verizon, and so on. So when a person buys an Android dispositive, they are going to get your app already installed. So then they start using it and you monetize through this ad. So essentially you don't need to put any efforts on distribution. And this is great if you're like a good developer, but you don't want to have nothing to do with marketing. And those are many of the cases. And now distribution is king. So if you cannot unlock distribution, you can do these partnerships with telcos and they are going to do it for you. Yeah. So that's like think out Android as another possibility instead of always like leaving them on the side.
As a dev myself, I wouldn't have thought of, I mean, I know that happens, but I wouldn't have thought of that being available to somebody that isn't like Netflix or something, right? I mean, I just would have probably assumed that they'd only make deals with gigantic applications or gigantic companies. But if that's available to a wider collection of companies and devs, that's a great way to bring an audience, right? And then the audience is what's sort of triggering your monetization strategy through the ad display. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, just one more comment. Last time I spoke with T-Mobile, the minimum was $30K per month. But we also have many other companies and many other countries that are cheaper. So I think it's accessible for most of the developers.
Okay, so we've got an idea of what platforms to build for and how to maybe acquire, get people into the funnel. So the other, I think, big thing in the tech stack part of this discussion that we haven't touched on yet is AI, right? Which is something that is kind of dominating the discussion. Everybody's talking about AI, whether it be using AI to build your app or integrating AI features into your app from a perspective of like buyers and sellers, maybe from buyers in particular, right? The people who might purchase your application as somebody who is built and then is selling the application. What have you found as far as, let's talk about maybe them separately. So there's like using AI to help you build and run your application versus putting AI into your app. I would guess using AI in your app is probably very popular. People really want to see that. They're excited about it. It probably is a net sort of multiplier for the interest, right? If you've got quote unquote AI features in your app. Please feel free to refute that if that's not correct, but that'd be my guess. Whereas using AI to help you build the application, that sounds, just at first blush to me, sounds like probably a net negative for buyers, just because of the unknown. But honestly, I don't know. What have you been seeing as far as what people want to see around like the infrastructure of how the app was built and how much AI helped with that?
Investors or buyers want to invest in an app that they can scale. So how strong is the code behind of your app? It's important for them. Right. And this is something that they are going to see in the due diligence. So even if we have a really strong case and we get the interest from buyers and they make an offer that is interesting for you, but then they bring their CTO, and the CTO that has 15 years of experience is like, guys, if I bring like 300K users in a month, this is going to die. That's going to be a hard no for them. Right. So I think all that it's like buy coding is very cool, but at some point you need to think as a buyer if you want to exit and what they are going to look at. And traction is important, revenue is important, but it's also important the literary code. That is what they are buying at the end of the day with all the other stuff, like the marketing, distribution, and so on. So I think that's one important thing. And the other one is AI wrappers. I also understand the hype around like building an AI app and then distribute it through TikTok and organic, but the investors don't see it the same way. They just see this as like something that is trendy now, but in 3 years, nobody's going to care. And why am I saying this? Like, I don't want to be the boring person in the room in the app industry, but they are looking to make investments 3 to 5 years from now. So they are going to think 5 years forward. And 5 years from now, if your app in the name has like AI, you're going to be like so old school. You're going to be like, it's like now if you sell like triple W or crypto, you're like so cringy. So yeah, they are always thinking 3 to 5 years from now. And for you as a seller, if you want to exit, you need to think about your valuation, how many multipliers you want it to be, multipliers in terms of annual revenue. So if you want the multiplier to be 5x, that most of my clients want, that is like, is your business valuable 5 years from now? So I think that in terms of AI, I think it's very cool, but not making your whole business about AI. Have a strong business case outside of a good app. Yeah. And also, Ben, you're like a developer yourself. So what do you think of including AI?
I think I largely agree with what you're saying from like a technical perspective. I think including AI features perhaps would be something that would be interesting and can create the AI tech itself can create a multiplier for you as a builder to make things that are more interesting than you otherwise could create, at least in the time allotted, right? But making the whole thing all about AI, that to me feels like a cash grab or like a trendy, I'm going to jump on this trend. I'm expecting this app to basically live and die in some relatively short-term cycle, and I'm just going to try and extract the value that I can from it in the time, which is a perfectly fine short-term business goal to have, right? But maybe those apps are not the apps that you want to work on a considerable exit for, because like you said, that's going to be exciting for people on X and for TikTok, and to like gain growth quickly and build up at least short-term viable business, but it's not going to, like you said, it's not going to last long-term. And I would guess too, like with things like AI wrappers, honestly, probably even if you did everything right, it's probably the case that your use cases will just go away because they'll get subsumed into other more integrated systems, or the backing system that you're using, that you're wrapping around, will change enough that your thing won't even work anymore in 6 months, right? Like you'll be like, oh, well, this can't exist now because of the changes that occurred. I think they are kind of by definition trendy, fashion, the length of a fashion season. Like it's hot right now, but in 6 months, no one's going to care, or a year, no one's going to care. So not saying don't do it, just maybe realize that as part of your building process and say, look, I'm building this to exist for 12 months or less, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to make money, hopefully. But then I have this other bet that I'm making as a developer or an app maker that is more long-term. And that's the one I'm going to invest. I'm going to use the advice that we're providing here today to try and set that thing up for like a longer term, more measurable exit, right? Like that is, like you said, is an actual multiple. I love the idea of, and I mean, this is probably a good idea just to do as a business owner in general, but like certainly if you're trying to set up a business and an app for later sale, just start thinking about yourself, thinking about the app 5 years from now, from day one, right? Like what is it going to look like? How is it going to evolve? You have to make guesses. You're not going to know perfectly, but like you need to figure out what that looks like so that you can tell that story to the buyers, and that it's credible, like that it actually makes sense, right? That they essentially buy it as a story, because that's what you're going to be selling. As much as you're selling the app the assets, the current financials, right? You're also selling a story. And if the story is bad, people, like you said, people are going to see into that and they're not going to believe you.
Yes, 100%. And one more thing, this doesn't mean that like if you have AI app, oh no, you're screwed. Just let them go and build something new. You can still get a 6-figure, 7-figure exit with a good AI app. So it's not that like life ended. It's just the expectations for your exit. Even if you have like an AI app that is on the first to 20th category charting, you can still get a 8-figure, 9-figure exit. So it's not the end of the world. We are just talking like how a buyer sees this, their POV. That is very different than ours, that we are very into the industry and getting super excited with all the new trends and scrolling on the X. Like,
No, that's really good. It's not that all the options are on the table. It's just, I think the base advice is like, just make sure that you're thinking about it from the perspective of the buyer and how they generally think, right? And I think it's important to call out that they don't think like you necessarily. And so you want to keep that in mind when you're building. It's totally reasonable and fair. Let's say we've got a good app. Let's move on in our fake app development journey, right? We've built an app. We made good choices. Hopefully we got a good foundation. We've picked the right platforms for us. And now we're trying to figure out distribution strategies and how to get it out there, how to acquire users. Maybe we could approach this from like two perspectives. One is just sort of your general advice for how to do that well. And then two would be maybe you're trying to target a sale of your application like in the next, let's say 12 months. It's more immediate than at some point in the future. Are there things that you think people should do differently about their like UA and other distribution strategies, kind of knowing that they're potentially going to want to try and sell this thing in like the reasonably short term, like the next 12 months?
Most of the buyers, they had some sort of exit in the past, if they are individual buyers. And if they are companies, they have been out there we are talking about companies that have the capital to invest millions in acquiring an app. So they already succeeded in the past. Right. And if they succeeded in the past, going viral and all the organic thing wasn't really a big thing in the past, like 2 or 5 years. So most probably they grew through paid acquisition. So they already know all the ins and outs on how to grow through paid media. So ideally you want to unlock the other part. So then also in your story, it's like, hey, organic is already working. This engine, you can just take it and it's going to work. And now you can add all your knowledge on paid on top of it and like leverage this. If you come and your only acquisition channel or your main acquisition channel is paid, then for their side, it's like, okay, yeah, I can optimize the campaigns a little bit. I can open new channels, but the difference that I'm gonna make is not gonna be huge. So I think if you can unlock organic, that's a huge added value for you and for them too. You just look sexier. It's like you figured out something that they couldn't. or that they don't know. Yeah. Many of my buyers, they are like between 30 and 50 years old. And all this like TikTok thing for them is so new. And they like don't know Spark Ads. They don't know the difference between a content creator and an influencer. It's another whole world. So if you can, bring something that they don't understand, sort of, then that's very interesting. So organic influencer marketing, they see it as paid because at the end of the day, you're still paying for that acquisition. So some sort of affiliate marketing. But if you can unlock organic through your own social media, that's great. ASO is still good. If you have like healthy conversion metrics inside of the App Store as well. And then if you can find any other tactics to acquire users, it can be virality, partnerships, referrals is very good. And these referrals of like sharing, bring a friend, share with a friend and get like a discount, or share this directly in your stories on IG. Anything that you can do for them to like bring more people, for your current users to bring more people, that's also very good. What are your thoughts, Ben, on the organic side as a developer? Because also
no, I think that's all good advice. I like the idea of basically saying bring something to the table that the investors and that these buyers don't necessarily either know how to do or haven't figured out, because that's going to give you an edge, right, when it comes to selling your app to them versus them buying a different app, is if you can bring something they don't have. And I think that makes total sense, that like they know how to paid acquisition is something that it's a well-trodden area, right? People have done it for a long time, and it's evolving, of course, but that it does have a good sort of strategy that you can follow. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And as far as like the organic stuff around metrics that you'd want to use to showcase that, maybe particularly this is something that I don't super understand very well. Let's say you did have some influencers that you were using for like influencer marketing on TikTok or something. Are they going to want to see just sort of like the standard stuff that you'd see as far as conversions with links and stuff. But like, I just, a question to be like, what would the buyer want to see, especially if maybe they don't fully understand that? What would be a good way to try to explain it to them so that they could?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I usually you speak the same language when you go to cost per install, customer acquisition costs. So the same metrics that they have been using in the past. And how you can get this is if you're working with influencers, you can get a conversion rate from impression to install. Depending on that conversion rate, you can scale influencer marketing. And you can also compare that conversion rate with other channels and then get your cost per install depending on how much you're paying influencers. So that's a common language. And that's actually something that I use a lot. Many of my clients, they have really good distribution through organic and TikTok. I always get the cost per install. That is something that they were not really measuring. And then that cost per install is like a very strong selling point to buyers because it's usually only 10 or 20% of what they usually pay on paid acquisition channels. So we are talking maybe like a 20 cents install versus 2 to 5. That is what you pay on paid on tier 1 markets.
Speak the same language if you can, right? Like use the same, convert it into the same metrics so that it makes sense to them in the way that they understand through like paid UA. And then maybe highlight the fact that it's a new channel that you're not as familiar with. So this is something we're bringing to the table that you didn't already have. And if it is, it's cheaper, right? Like highlight the difference in cost so that you can see that, we're doing this very efficiently. We're getting these users in a way that maybe is a little foreign to you, but is providing a really good return.
Yes. And one more thing in terms of the setup, how they think about influencer marketing is like you sending DMs, getting them to collaborate, and then you need to track through spreadsheets. Like if you think about it, they know like the dashboard from Meta, they know the dashboard from TikTok for Business. So you want to create the same view for your influencer campaign. Right. So you show them that like this is structure. You can just scale like the same that you just do 3 clicks of Meta and you're scaling. You can do the same here with influencer. So some of my clients use like third-party tools to track payouts, track views, track creators, send reminders. So everything is managed through a platform. So it's very organized and clean. And then they also like that. It's like, talking the same language. We also like work in the same way that you do. This is just at your channel. Like, don't get scared.
This won't be a hassle. Don't worry. It's just like what you know. Here's the way to do it. That's smart. Okay, so as far as kind of managing your distribution strategy and stuff, like we've talked about, you want to have a good story, you want to show that you're on top of things and it makes sense and that it's similar enough to what they know. When it comes to managing that in-house versus managing it like with a third party, is there a preference there of like what buyers want to see on like whether you're kind of handling that stuff yourself or you're farming it out?
When you look at the P&Ls, you're going to see the past month's revenue. And if it exists, a month-over-month growth. And ideally, it exists. So that's another important point. You want to sell when the chart is growing, when you're going up in terms of installs and revenue. You don't want to wait for that to be a plateau because then that's a red flag for them. Like, oh, what happened? Your app is no longer relevant or the marketing engine stopped working. That's important. And going back to the point of having in-house versus third-party growth, you want to sell your app with the growth engine included. So this can be the influencer marketing strategy. It can be the paid marketing strategy and campaign. And if you're relying on a third party, just be careful on how much of that strategy you actually own, how much you know. And if the buyer wants to like acquire that as well, because if you're talking about a big company, they usually have marketing teams of 100 people. So they don't want an agency or they don't want anything else. So think about it as like the growth engine. Ideally, you own it as much as possible.
I love that idea that it's like, it's probably a pro for you as a small team to outsource that because it's a burden that you don't have to incur yourself. But that's generally speaking probably a net negative for a buyer because, like you said, they're going to have the in-house teams. They're not going to continue with that agency. They're going to want to do it themselves. And then if all the mechanisms and data are all inaccessible, then it's almost like they have to start over, which is not what they want. Right? Like you said, they want to see the engine running, and they want you to, they want that to be like a deliverable. It sounds like, right? Really, it should be part of what is delivered to them along with the assets themselves and all the financial data and stuff. They want the engine to come along, and if you've effectively put the engine in someone else's, hands to manage, it may or may not even be accessible to them post sale, and so that's going to be a net negative. That's something that probably builders may not think of, right? Because like I said, they think of it as like, oh, this is great. I don't have to do this myself. But again, kind of goes back to think like a buyer, right? Like, what are they going to want? and that is probably not what they're going to want.
And I think one more point on the paid UA side that we didn't cover is also diversifying channels, because as we mentioned that you are very risky if your app is only iOS and you depend 100% on the App Store. It happens the same with the big four. So like Meta, TikTok, Google and Apple with Apple Ads. If you only rely on these channels, they can make any change and your business goes like south.
Sideways. Yeah. Right.
Yes. So anything that you can add on top is going to be helpful for you if you rely mainly on paid.
Right. Nice. Okay. Let's dig into the nitty gritty, the numbers, right? The financials. If I had to guess, I would say that it's possible that at least from like the dev side, this is probably the thing that like dev owned businesses are going to probably be the weakest at, just because our expertise is in, writing code and stuff. What are the key metrics and what are the things that like devs and, people who are running these businesses need to know and need to have figured out when it comes to selling, like profit margins and all of the buzzwords that maybe, you've heard of as a app maker or a dev, but you don't necessarily have a deep knowledge of. I guess how important is it to buyers that the seller can sort of rattle off this stuff and speak that financial language fluently, or are they willing to accept a little bit of naivete there?
As a seller, you can go through two different paths for selling. It can be a strategic acquisition or financial acquisition. Of course, there are many more, but these are the main two that I see for app businesses. A strategic acquisition is if you have a unique feature or a unique product itself, and it might not have such strong financials, like very good profit margins, revenue growth. It might not be huge, but you maybe have a really good user base or lots of organic. Or your product is very unique. So the acquisition might be from the buyer standpoint because you're adding something to their business, that it can be a new business unit, a new value proposition, a new way of retaining their current clients. And in this case, financials matter, but not as much. It matters much more like what the value that you're adding to the business. And the second one is financial. So in this case, what matters is your revenue growth, your profit margins, and all that stuff. So I think first, like thinking out your product in how you want to exit, if it's going to be financial or strategic. And then about talking the same language, if you're going after a strategic one, you want to have that vision in your mind, right? So if this company is going to add my product into their portfolio, or into their offerings, what is the value that they are adding to their customers? And based on that, you can try to get to some sort of evaluation based on the value that you're adding to that business. How much new money they can make based on retention, new clients, cross-promoting with your app, and so on. Yeah,
so it sounds like really the thing to think about as you're approaching the financial part of your business and what is important to buyers. It's going to be, what are you selling, right? Like, what is it that you are selling to them? If you're selling to them a newly patented piece of technology that's exciting and interesting and is generally unavailable to most people, they're acquiring that specific tech, and therefore maybe the rest of it, the value is there rather than sort of the general health of the business, as opposed to if you're selling an app just because, hey, we have good user growth, we have good acquisition, we have a good pipeline, the app is popular, but we're not doing anything that is so groundbreaking in it that nobody's ever heard of it before, that the value really is, the value is in the business, not in the tech or the product as much. So thinking about it from that perspective of like, is it something specific about an asset that you're selling them, or is it sort of the business in total that is what is bringing the value, and how literate you should be and how on top of things you should be? 100%.
And if we think really high, Mark Zuckerberg in the social network, he was saying like, I don't know how we're going to monetize this, but I'm not going to add ads in the beginning. So it's the same for your product. Like if you want to keep a really clean UX UI and you don't want to put any paywalls, you don't want to monetize, but you know that you're building something very valuable in terms of the product itself. That's also a road that you can take. But going back to financials, that maybe that's where most of the questions usually come. So you can either understand their language or you can partner with a third company like me. But to keep it simple is you need to have a P&L. This P&L, I know that it sounds like so far off the way, but it's like very straightforward. You just need to have, if you're monetizing through subscriptions or in-app purchases, how many subscribers you have, so monthly revenue. Then you're going to have the deductions from the App Store fees, Stripe if you monetize through web or any other third parties. You're going to have your tools, so Revenue Cut, Adapty, Superwall, any other marketing software that you use. If you have any employees or freelancers, and then spend on marketing channels. And based on that, you're going to have your profit margins and your monthly profit. That's enough. Actually, we can add, Ben, if that's okay, link here throughout like a template of a P&L. And I think that's very useful for you to see as an owner. So you can see in the past months, it's literally having a picture of your business from a financial standpoint. And if you're a buyer, yeah, of course you're interested in this. And once you have that picture, you can see where most of your revenue is going to and where can you optimize essentially. Some of my clients, they were scaling revenue very fast, but they were losing track of the expenses too. So then when we were like so excited about the exit, like, oh, guys, you're making so much money, this is crazy. Right. Then we built the P&L and it was like, okay, 60% of your revenue is going to influencer marketing. So how can we clean this up? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, so really, I'd actually, based on what you said, I think what might be really interesting to talk about here is how somebody like you, a broker, can help with that. I think it's a great service that you could provide, right? Is like you said, right? You go and you meet with a client and it looks exciting on the surface, and then you get into it and you're like, oh, well, maybe you're not quite as ready for sale as we thought you were based on the initial impressions. Here's what you can do to clean it up and make sure that you are as attractive as possible. So things like having I think the template's going to be great. I encourage anybody listening, download the template, check it out. Ways to understand what it is that you need to, what you should display and how you should display it, I think are important. And then maybe that's the easy part, but maybe the hard part is more like, how do I take the numbers that I have about my business and insert them into your P&L template and have it make sense? I'm guessing there's probably going to be a lot of cases where it's not necessarily super obvious where things go. So is that the kind of thing in part that you offer? If like I were to partner with you to sell an app, like you're going to sort of help me make sure that I'm telling the story and the financial story in the right way. Is that something that you found a lot that people are kind of confused about that?
Yeah, we have two main chapters of the sale, I will say, because it's literally like a story. It's your exit story. So it's nothing small. It doesn't matter the amount you're exiting as a founder. And I think that's huge. Right. So we're going to be together into chapters. One is the preparation, and this is putting together your P&L, seeing your financials, seeing what we should optimize, and so on. And the other one is putting yourself in front of potential buyers. And that's also a challenge. It's like sitting down in a room or in a meeting call, and they ask you like tons of different questions about the business, and you need to like stand still and be like, my business is so good, man, you're not going to ask me any question that is going to break me. Right. So in those two sense, but also in terms of your expectations on how much you want to exit for, that is the value that you see on your business. We can either give you like a realistic expectation, or we can go with your expectation and see how to get there. And that how to get there, it might be having stronger profit margins, opening new user acquisition channels, scaling the UA. So for example, a model that I'm working with, it's bringing to third parties that these are not my services, but I bring user acquisition capital. This is also called user acquisition financing. It works similar to a bank loan, but it's only capital for user acquisition, and you pay back based on ROAS. So for developers, it's very useful. And then I bring another third party that is the user acquisition engine, and it can be an agency, freelancer, consultant, whatever is better for each business. We scale the app, and then we go to sell again 6 months from now or 9 months from now, when the revenue numbers is better, the profit margins too. So the total deal value might be closer to your expectation. So essentially what I look to is like making the exit for the founder a really good process in terms of first like having everything organized and on time and so on, and then the value itself, that you get a value that you're happy with, because at the end of the day you work in this project for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, as much as it was, you put it like so much time and energy and creativeness into it. So we want to make sure that everything is, you feel happy with everything that is happening.
So let's say you had reasonably good numbers, right? You're profitable, all that stuff, it all looks generally good. Is there I'm guessing that profit margin is going to be probably a pretty strong indicator for people. Is there a number or an amount that is like, guaranteed to be attractive, or is there like a minimum? Like what are, as far as like how profitable you are, is there a range or a number that buyers are looking for?
What I'm seeing so far is for businesses that are making less than 1 million per year. Ideally, you want to have profit margins that are 70 plus. And I'm talking like app businesses. This doesn't apply if you have any other type of business. So 70% plus if you're under 1 million ARR. And then if you're between 1 and 10, we can go lower. And this is going to be ideally between 25 and 50, or as high as the highest that you can do, the better. But 20 to 50 is like a good range.
But if we're talking about, a smaller app, it's going to be 70 or better. They really want to see like really high returns, right? Like it shouldn't, your expenses and your operating costs, if it's a purely app business, hopefully aren't crazy, and they want to see a really high profit margin, because what I'm guessing there is like you said, because they're looking at like the 5-year plan, they're probably thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to stoke this fire with acquisition money and other ways to grow it, and we have that engine, right? Like I can take the margins and stuff like that and sort of add in what we're going to add in, and then I can project essentially what we're probably likely to make. And so you want that to be kind of as good as you can make it before they acquire it, right? Yes,
totally. A good use for developers is that with the Apple change, now the profit margins are going to be definitely better.
Yeah, that's true. It's very possible that they could go up quickly with this change for sure. So what are the if we were to look at like an app that's, it's been out for a year or two, it's doing well, it's got the engine, it's got all the things that we want in general, what are maybe some things that you've seen that take that as like a standard view of an app and then compare it to another app that has something extra that just makes it worth like twice as much or 5 times as much? Or like, are there things that you've seen that make apps that have like a good foundation, but they have something special that just makes them, worth a ton by comparison, like the multipliers that really leverage the app and the business to a crazy high valuation?
Yeah, I think if you can be the best at something, that makes it really sexy for acquirers. So it can be, you have like the lowest CPI on the category, or inside of the category, you own many apps that are between the 1 to 200 ranking. So you can claim that you own like 5% of the category or of the users in the category, or you have like incredible distribution through organic. So if you can tell the story that like I'm the biggest player in this, or I'm the best at doing this, that already puts you as a front runner versus all your apps in the same maybe category and revenue stage. Because let's say that you're in the same revenue stage of another app in the same category, but your CPI is much lower, then they see opportunity to scale fast. Yeah, and then portfolios are also interesting. That's also something that I don't see as much. I see many developers that they get like new ideas and they develop many different types of apps, different categories. And that's very interesting to see. But also something that buyers are interested in is a portfolio. So 6 apps on health and fitness, 10 utility apps. So that can be also interesting to explore. And then another idea we got with another person from the industry was, if you're going to have a star product, you can also develop more apps in the same category and just cross promote, sending all the traffic to your star product. So that's also can be seen as another user acquisition channel that you own. And that will make a really strong case study.
That's a really interesting idea of like creating a portfolio with the intention of having sort of the quote unquote lesser apps be like a driver of acquisition and of growth for the main app. That's especially now because we're lowering the barriers to building stuff through, using AI tools and other things to help you build applications. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's a great idea to like, maybe you could build some other things that you're not really intending for them to go crazy on their own. Their goal is to really feed that main experience, and you could maybe do it relatively cheaply from like a both money and time perspective if you leverage things like, AI tools and stuff like that to help you kind of build those other ones that really just serve as channels. That's a great idea. And so in that scenario, they would buy the star app, and then they would basically buy the other apps, really part of that like acquisition engine that you talked about before, it sounds like.
Yeah, and also you can play around with these apps and explore more, because if your star product, you don't want to you just want to keep it very nice and the acquisition very clean, and I don't know, the team that you're involving in that app and everything, you want to be really selective. With these other apps, you can explore with more different UX UI, with monetizing in different ways, with new paywalls, without damaging your main product.
Right.
And even giving away equity, this is another idea. If you couldn't unlock some of the channels, you can bring another person, like a co-founder for these apps that is really great in this channel. So for example, a person that is really good in organic, let's say a Gen Z, so you can bring them on board, give them part of these new apps that you're developing for them to unlock that engine without risking your main app. So I think there are very many creative ways that you can use to think out user acquisition that is outside of writing ASA.
Right, the standard one. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I like it being a test bed sort of for ideas that you're like, well, I don't really want to do this in my main app because what if it doesn't do well? You want a place where you can truly experiment, and one of those other apps might be a great place to do it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's say that you are getting ready for, now we're in a great spot and we're getting ready to exit. What are the things that we need to really kind of hone in on as we're getting ready to find a buyer to make sure that we're kind of in the best possible place to, the goal for the seller obviously is going to be hopefully to find a good buyer and to find one that pays you as much as you want or pays you as much as the market will bear, right? You want a good price. So what are the things that you need to really keep in mind kind of as we're approaching that sale? We're getting close.
So far, what I've seen, it's very straightforward in terms of app acquisitions. I think you don't have as many information inputs as other businesses. In our case, it's like how many subscribers, how many in-app purchases average per month, how much are you paying for each one of the softwares. So it's very straightforward. I think the most important thing to be ready is your expectation. Be clear on what might be on the table, the offers that you might get, and if you're happy with those, and then decide on the type of buyer. Because maybe at the beginning you think like, oh no, if they have the capital, that's fine. If they can pay as much as I want, that's fine. But then when you see that your baby is gonna go with these guys, it's like, are you happy with it? I also have had some cases where the financial part was a good fit. Like both parties were okay, but they didn't like the potential buyer for X, Y, and Z reasons. Also, you're making an exit. It's not something that you make like 50 times in your life.
Right.
Maybe you make, if you're a serial entrepreneur, 1 to, 5 exits, 10 exits. So if you also want that to be as part of your story, who is the company or the people that you want to be part of that story, it seems too vanilla. And at the beginning, I thought like, oh, this is going to be super transactional. So for me, it's going to be easier because I'm just going to sell faster. But it's not the case. So I think be prepared. Everything that it's like documents, accesses, that's easy. That just takes like some clicks. But more be prepared of like that part of your story is going to happen and who you want to involve in that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something probably that some people think of ahead of time, but I bet a lot of people don't, right? I would imagine that a lot of builders and devs and stuff probably do in the abstract think of it in a transactional way like you described, but I've never exited before, so I don't have any personal experience, but my guess would be if I were to, I probably would think of it fairly transactionally, and then as you get closer you start to do all the things that you described. You're like, well, this is my baby and I spent the last 3 years doing it, and like, oh, these people seem kind of like, I don't know if they're going to be a good steward, right, of the thing that I built. And if you feel more emotional about it as you get closer compared to maybe in the beginning, you're like, well, it's just this money and I'm going to sell and I'm going to give you this access and we're going to be done. I'm sure as you get closer, you're going to feel it more than you're going to think about it. And that's a really good point to maybe try and remember that early so that you can have that be part of your process for the whole process, rather than maybe getting cold feet at the end or something where you're like, well, no, I don't know if I feel good about this. And, I'm sure that can damage reputations and stuff like that. It's all, everything is a trade-off, right? So you want to think about it from all the angles. And I like the point about, don't forget that you spent a lot of time and energy and blood, sweat, and tears, right, to make this happen. And don't maybe value that at $0, right? Like, give that a value and an intrinsic value in and of itself, even if it's just emotional value, and consider that. That's a really good advice, I think. I would bet a lot of people probably wouldn't think of that initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like we've gotten all the way to the end. We've sold our app. We've made millions of dollars. It went really well.
We're all happy.
We're all happy. Everyone, it's part of this new company is now shepherding our app, and it's a part of our story, and everything is great. And you got another sale on your books. And I've got a successful exit. It's all good. So thank you very much, Evelin, for coming on the show and sharing all of your advice and guidance. I think there was a lot of things in here that probably devs and other app builders wouldn't necessarily think about without you providing advice. So I think it'll be really valuable. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing what you have.
Thank you for having me. And for the developers that are listening, first, thank you for bearing with me and my accent. I know that it can be strong. So if you understood everything, here's like some plans for you.
Yeah.
And secondly, I will say have fun because we're having really good momentum in the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, like enjoy the ride, and the community is super well connected, and everyone is willing to help. The guys at Adapti are amazing. So yeah, just have fun while doing it. You're in a great momentum.
So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
X, IG, TikTok,
X, IG,
LinkedIn, email.
Okay, all the standard ones.
Everywhere. All the standard ones. So we can leave the links on the description, I guess. That's gonna be the easiest way.
Awesome. So yeah, look for links to Evelin in the show notes, and also look for the template in there as well. So if you want to learn more about how to set up a P&L, we'll have a link out to her template in the show notes as well. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, and thanks again, Evelin, for coming on the show. And to the listeners, we'll see you next time.